This is Wu-Tang Clan. This is a new Snoop Dogg. Obviously, that's real popular.
What's up, everybody? I am FINNMCKENTY. This is the Punk Rock NBA, and today we're here to talk about one of my favorite topics, the whole emo rap thing. Now, I've talked about this before, and I don't want to repeat myself, but a lot of people have asked for it, especially in response to some news from this week. So this week, Epitaph Records announced that they have signed Lil Lotus and guccihighwaters. Those are two of the bigger names in the underground emo rap thing, although I put that in quotes because I don't actually think they're rappers at all, which I will talk about in this video. And if you haven't heard them, they sound like this.
It's a lot to take and you can handle this. Am I better off on my own?
And this.
When the colors fade, I'll be back in your arms on another day.
Because really what it comes down to is whether you like it or not, this stuff is the new face of that underground alternative music, just the same as metalcore was 10 or 15 years ago, just the same as mall screamo was before that, and pop punk was before that. But before I do that, I wanted to mention that I did make a Spotify playlist for this, which includes all the artists I talk about in this video, as well as a bunch of other ones that I wasn't able to mention. So if you're interested in that, check it out at the link in the description.
It first appeared on the scene 5 years ago and found its market in the neighborhoods where it was born.
So first of all, I want to talk about exactly where the whole emo rap thing fits into all the different ways that metal and hardcore and rock and rap are mixing these days. Because as I've talked about a lot, and as you've probably seen, these things have cross streams a lot over the past few years. So I actually put together a little chart that kind of lays all this out, because you guys know that I love making charts. I'm gonna do more charts. Charts are fun. So on this side, we have the sound. So basically whether it is more sonically similar to rap or rock. Sonically, really the main thing, almost the only thing that all the artists on this chart have in common is that they use 808s instead of live drums. Beyond that, it actually varies quite a bit. Some of them rap, some of them don't rap, some of them sing, some of them scream, some have guitars, some don't have guitars. It's really kind of all over the place. And if you're not familiar, don't worry, I'll play examples of all this stuff in just a minute, and also there's the Spotify playlist. And then on the other side, down here, we have the cultural component. Meaning, are these artists and their fans more part of rap culture or rock culture? And it may seem like I'm splitting hairs, but this part is actually really important, maybe more important than the sound. Because remember, music is not just a sonic thing, it's also a culture and it's a community, and that part matters a lot. As one example, think about all the melodic death metal inspired Christian metalcore bands of the early 2000s, like say As I Lay Dying or whatever. A lot of them sounded very similar to At the Gates or Dissection or whatever other mellow death band you want to mention, but they were most definitely not part of metal culture, right? As I Lay Dying could not show up in 2002 and play a show at the Gates and have it be cool. Sonically very similar, but culturally super, super different, and that put them in another genre. And I'm going to talk about everything in this video, but really what I'm focusing on is the stuff in the upper right part of this chart. I hope I got that right, because I always point the wrong way when I'm doing videos where I've got a chart, but hopefully this is the upper right part of the chart. That's what I'm focusing on in this video. But first, let me go through all the other boxes so you can kind of understand where this stuff fits and exactly why it's so interesting to me. Okay, so going basically in order from most mainstream to least mainstream, the first box is what I'm calling melodic rap. This is basically the dominant form of mainstream rap at the moment. Sounds kind of like this.
180 on a Range Rover, 400 on a road show, 300 on a G-Wagon. I'm a big dog, you can add it up.
Basically just a trap beat with some sort of melodic auto-tune singing over the top. Big names here you've heard would be like Travis Scott, Drake, Future, Lil Baby, all that kind of stuff. Now this stuff just kind of started getting really popular in the last few years, but actually I think you could trace it back to Kanye's album from 2008, 808s and Heartbreak, but that's another story. What I want you to focus on for the context of this video are two things. First of all, the stuff in this box oftentimes has actual rapping in it, which is not true of a lot of the stuff in the other boxes. Second thing is that this stuff is 100% part of rap culture, meaning that even though it doesn't sound like, T.I. or whatever, the values and lifestyle they talk about are not really any different than what they've been in rap for the past, 20, 25 years. As an example of that, this Roddy Ricch song, which sounds kind of emo, but if you listen to lyrics, it's about hood shit.
Gotta keep it on me, I wanna die young. I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
And second, we have what I'm calling emo rap, also super mainstream popular. What I'm talking about there is stuff like Lil Uzi Vert, Juice WRLD, Post Malone. This song would be pretty representative of what I'm talking about in this box.
I don't really care if you cry.
Now, some of you are probably asking, what the fuck? This stuff doesn't sound like rock. Why do you have it in a box that says it's sonically similar to rock? This doesn't sound like rock. What the hell are you talking about? Well, yes, it doesn't sound like, you know, Chuck Berry or whatever you think rock is, but actually it's pretty sonically similar to a lot of modern rock. As a couple examples, XXXtentacion sampled Spit It Out by Slipknot. On this track he did with Ski Mask, the Slump God.
I feel like Nick Cannon, cause I'm wildin' out. I don't got on.
And he did this song with Travis Barker. Lil Uzi Vert and Juice WRLD, RIP, both talked many times about how they're influenced by bands like Escape the Fate and Bless the Fall. And if you listen to their vocal melodies, it's actually super obvious. Like, this could totally be a mid-2000s like mall emo song if you just played it with a full band instead of this like trap kind of arrangement.
All girls are the same. They're running my brain.
So nobody's gonna mistake this from Metallica or whatever, but actually the rock roots to me are pretty obvious if you listen honestly. But that said, even though this stuff does have those rock roots, it's still mostly a part of hip hop culture, not rock culture. Again, I'm painting in broad strokes here and there are some blurred lines, but really like the average Lil Uzi Vert fan is pretty much like just a mainstream rap fan. They're not like a Warped Tour or Ozfest kind of fan. That's what I'm talking about. So now moving over to the other side of the chart, this is where things start to get pretty interesting. Basically, this box is people who grew up on metal and punk and hardcore doing rap. And I'm gonna split that up into actually two like subgenres. The first one is what I call 3-6 Mafia core. Now, I'm obviously kind of joking with that name, but it's actually pretty accurate because essentially this is what happened when some like punk and metal kids discovered 3-6 Mafia and Tommy Wright and all that like old school early 90s Memphis rap, and they were like, we should do our version of that. SUICIDEBOYS are probably the clearest example of that. And by the way, I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I love this stuff. But in case you weren't aware of exactly how similar it is to that early 90s Memphis stuff, listen to this 3-6 Mafia song from, I think, 94, 95. There's a whole bunch of these artists. Again, I put some on the playlist, but some of the ones you might have heard of would be like Pouya, Shakewell, and Fat Nick, among others. And so what's interesting, as you can see from the chart, is that this stuff is essentially 100% sonically rap, but also 100% culturally rock. The tour earlier this year that had like SUICIDEBOYS, Denzel Curry, Trash Talk, Turnstile, and Pouya was actually the perfect example of this. That said, this is maybe like the oldest kind of subgenre on the chart. It's been going on for quite a while. And the second subgenre in this corner of the chart is trap metal, and I didn't make this up. This is what people actually call it. Basically just rap with a bunch of like super distorted screaming. It sounds like this.
Like it's glass, all you niggas fucking trash. You're not that savage, your arms are slow. River with fear when you step to the gun.
As you can tell, this is some pretty intense, extreme shit. I think of it as like the deathcore of rap, and I personally don't really like it that much. It's a little bit too noisy for me, but I totally get it. I respect it. I love that it pushes the boundaries of several genres at once. And this stuff has also been going on for quite a while. I think probably Bones was the first person to do this back around like 2013 or so when he started putting screaming in some of his songs. But it's just now starting to hit the radar of a lot of rock fans, I think. For example, when Bring Me the Horizon took Scarlxrd out on tour earlier this year. And of all the stuff in this chart, I would say that this stuff, trap metal, is the stuff that I've seen rock and metal fans be the most accepting of. Which is interesting because sonically it's definitely the least accessible stuff on the chart, but it's also the furthest thing from like mainstream rap, so it kind of makes sense from that perspective because rock and metal fans hate rap. So it makes sense that they would like the thing that's furthest from actual rap. And I think you're gonna see a lot more like deathcore type people get into this stuff over the next couple years. Okay, so that actually brings us to the focus of this video, the stuff here in the upper right, what I'm calling emo with 808s. And you might have noticed something already. You might be looking at this chart and you're saying, well, wait a minute, according to this chart, it sounds like rock and it's part of rock culture, then how is it rap? Why do people call it emo rap? And to that I would say, that is my exact point. It's not rap. They don't rap. It doesn't sound like rap. I mean, listen to this.
Love hurts and I know you have a few scars. Let my love heal you.
Or this.
Yeah, I don't like silence, cause then all of these thoughts and feelings bubble up inside and
Or this.
I killed off the side me, left a loser in the past and now I'm glowing. If you really care about me, then it show me.
There's no rapping, they're not talking about hood shit, it's a guy singing over guitars about like emotional high school shit. To me, it just sounds like Blink-182 or The Story So Far, or maybe something like Title Fight or Tiger's Jar or something, but just with 808s instead of acoustic drums. Hence, emo with 808s. There's really like nothing rap about it. It's rock, and in fact, I think it's the most interesting, forward-thinking stuff happening in rock right now, and let me tell you exactly why I think that.
Don't wanna feel like this forever. Will I feel like this forever?
Artists like Shinigami, Fats'e, Lil Aaron, Lil Tracy, Smart Death, 93 Feet of Smoke. It just feels like this is exactly what the scene needed in a time when most like pop punk and metalcore and emo bands are just really completely uninspired. It feels like they're just going through the motions, executing just the same like rehashed version of what the pioneers of the genre did 10 years ago or whatever, without really bringing anything at all new to the table. Feels like they really just don't have anything to say. They're just like checking off the list of stuff that a pop punk or metalcore band is supposed to do. It feels like real emotion in actually the same way that a lot of the early MySpace stuff did. This is just like kids in their bedroom making shit, not because they have any kind of like master plan to like get famous or whatever. They're just making shit because they have something to say and they need to get it out into the world.
I don't wanna leave the house cause bitch I'm fucking sad.
Now, to be clear, what they're saying is not always positive, and as an old man, I have to say that honestly, kind of scares me a little bit how much they talk about drugs and a lot of other kind of self-destructive behavior, but I get it. You know, these are people going through some real serious shit, they're feeling pain, and when a lot of people are in those circumstances, they self-medicate, so I get it.
To make fun of my drug use. You ain't never had a struggle with the abuse, but I'm clean for once in a blue moon.
Unfortunately, the kid that I just showed you is dead. His name's hella sketchy. He was 18, super smart, super talented kid. Guys, if you're dealing with depression and anxiety, doing drugs is not gonna help. I speak from personal first-hand experience on that. I thought drugs were gonna make me feel better. They definitely didn't. My stepsister died of an OD when we were 20, so don't do it. Drugs are not the answer. Please get some help. And third, it's super authentically DIY in a way that really rock hasn't been for a while. Every band that I talk to is like, how do we get signed? How do we get a manager? How do we make labels care about us? Like, they want somebody to come along and hand it to them. And these kids, these like emo rapper type kids, they just don't think that way. They don't give a fuck about the industry. They are taking things into their own hands and just fucking doing it. Yes, they will sign to a label if somebody gives them an offer that makes sense, but they're not expecting it. They're not sitting around waiting for it. They put out music at a just ridiculous pace, like a song every couple days sometimes. They don't give a fuck about these like fancy, polished, slick recordings. They don't give a shit about clearing samples, even if maybe they should. They just don't give a fuck about any of the supposed rules of the music industry. One of my favorite examples of this is Ghostemane, who is killing it. He's sitting at like 2.4 million listeners on Spotify right now. His videos on YouTube get ridiculous numbers. He just headlined the same kind of venues that A Day to Remember and Of Mice and Men headline. I think I saw him play to like 1,300 people here in Seattle on a Tuesday night. And he is 100% independent. Yeah, of course he's gotten tons of offers from labels, but he's turned them all down because really, what are they gonna do for him that he hasn't already done for himself? I'm sure someday somebody will probably make him an offer make sense, but until then, he's not sitting around waiting for it.
While some say the commercial life of gangster rap may have nearly run its course, others insist it is here to stay.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this won't go anywhere. Maybe this will just be a little blip on the radar, but I don't know. The fact that Epitaph has taken interest like this really means something to me, because if you think about it, they have arguably the best batting average of any like independent, like punk, metal, hardcore, whatever kind of label. They've been relevant in every wave of the scene going back like 40 years. Of course, they have their roots in like the early 80s SoCal punk thing because they're founded by Brett from Bad Religion. They continue to stay relevant in the 90s skate punk thing. They signed bands like From First to Last and Every Time I Die in the 2000s, stayed relevant in that era. And now they've got everything from like Converge and the Descendants to Falling in Reverse and Architects. So the fact that they are showing interest in this stuff, I don't know, that says to me that you should at the very least be paying attention.
Now, not only radio, but music video programs and even hip-hop fan magazines have begun to regulate the messages of gangster culture.
I'm really not saying like rap is the new rock. I'm saying this stuff is rock. There's nothing rap about it. This is just rock. Rock has 808s in it now, so get used to it. So yes, something else will come along and displace this stuff in a few years as like the hot new thing, as it always does. But this stuff will leave some sort of a permanent impact on the music and the culture, just like every other hot new thing did before it died down. I mean, think about when metalcore was like the hot new thing 10 or 15 years ago, and people said it was just a flash in the pan, it was just a fad, and it was gonna go away. And to some extent, they were right, it was a fad, the bubble did burst, like they always do. But it also left a permanent impression. The most obvious one to me being breakdowns. Breakdowns were like for scene kids before, but now everybody plays breakdowns, because breakdowns are awesome. Even like real metal bands play breakdowns. Or another thing would be like the good cop, bad cop vocals, like the screamed verse and sung chorus thing. That's another thing that metalcore popularized, was hated on at the time, and now is just part of the heavy music vocabulary. And so I expect that this stuff will leave some sort of fossil remains behind like that too, that would become a permanent part of the sound. I would guess probably 808s, but we'll see. I also think it's gonna make the solo artist thing a lot more popular. For some reason in the like rock world, we always assume that band is the default, but why should it be? Because going solo really makes a lot more sense from first a commercial standpoint. Like it's a lot easier to market an individual than a band, and you know, there's just less ways to split the money when we're talking about one person instead of 4 or 5. And also from like an artistic perspective, when you are an individual creator, you get to do things your way, as opposed to with a band where you've got to make creative compromises with another 3 or 4 people. So just to be clear, I'm not saying this stuff is gonna like take over the world and make everything else disappear overnight or anything like that. I'm just saying that in my opinion, right now, this is the most interesting stuff happening in the rock world, and I'm stoked on it. And even if you don't like it, I think you should at least be paying attention, because anytime there's kids in their bedroom making shit that the old guard hates and declares a trendy flash in the pan that's gonna be here today, gone tomorrow, that's a sign that something cool is happening that's probably gonna make a permanent impact, and you should pay attention. The main question that I have, and we'll just have to see how this plays out, is how much commercial success the whole like emo with 808s thing is gonna have. On the one hand, I could totally see like the next Lil Peep's gonna come along and this is gonna blow up and it's gonna actually be a mainstream thing. But on the other hand, I could also see this just staying an internet thing that never really gets beyond that like 400 person venue kind of level and never really has like that big breakout star or hit song. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. So I don't know what's gonna happen there, but what I do know is that the kids who are into this stuff today are tomorrow's metal, punk, and hardcore kids, just like the scene kids of 2010 were the hardcore kids of 2015, covering up their Pierce the Veil tattoo with that cool new Expire long sleeve they bought. That's just the scene circle of life.
If you don't like it, don't listen to it. If you like it, love it. If you don't, you.
So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the whole like trap metal, emo rap kind of thing. I've talked about this stuff a lot, and I don't want to like keep beating this dead horse, so I'm probably not going to talk about this for a while longer unless something new happens. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think, especially what the commercial potential of this stuff will be. Is this ever going to turn into like a mainstream thing, or is this just going to remain like an underground internet thing? Curious to see what you guys think about that. And again, I did make a Spotify playlist for this. It has every artist I talked about in this video, as well as a bunch of other ones that I wasn't able to mention. So if you want to check that out, there's a link in the description. I also want to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon at the True Cult level or above. Because of your support, I've finally been able to get a podcast going. It's gonna launch in January. I was able to hire an editor to do all the stuff that I just didn't have time to do. So really excited about that. Really excited to have her on board. Her name is Deanna Chapman, by the way, and if you need help with your podcast, I would highly suggest getting in touch with her because she is fucking awesome. So thank you to her. Thank you to all the people who support me on Patreon. If you are interested in supporting me on Patreon, there's also a link to that in the description below. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.